uh, it's conventional to look at the history of the Russian Church in the modern period, segregating it into two halves. And that's what is right now unpopular. Basically, we're supposed to look right now at the church as the homeland, and then we're supposed to look at the church in the diaspora. And I'm not that happy about this because this partition brings the segregation with it, subconsciously or consciously, and it doesn't allow to look holistically at the historical narrative. So what I will be doing today, I will be avoiding this today in my class, and just I hope it's going to be clear, and I hope you ask me clarifying questions if necessary, right? So we mentioned All Russia Council, which remains uh, an object of research, an object of conversation, because of the forced pause, of forced break between the end of this council. I didn't say that this council was abruptly ended by the Bolsheviks. So Russia didn't didn't have constitutional assembly in February of 1918 because it was dispersed by the Bolsheviks, who didn't expect to win there. And similar thing happened to All Russian Council. I believe either either the house was confiscated or they just totally ran out of finances. Plus, the civil war divided the Russian church, and bishops couldn't travel across front lines. And some countries, they became independent, like Ukraine at the time of the council, or before the council. I don't exactly remember when Bolsheviks they advanced into Ukrainian territory, saying that Ukraine doesn't really fulfill obligations and allows the whites to travel through its territory to join the voluntary army. That what I believe was the reason why the Bolshevik government uh, uh, send army to Ukraine. So Ukraine was initially recognized as an independent state. It was under German occupation. So anyway, bishops could not travel, and the council ended without finishing discussions on number of matters. So that's important to remember. And next council, next independent council happened only in 1990, because before 1990 all patriarchs were elected by open vote. If you look at the elections of 1945, when Patriarch Alexei was elected, you see that the hierarch would raise and say, I, my clergy, and my flock of my diocese fill the blank, elect His Eminence Metropolitan Alexei of Leningrad. So, and then everybody else does the same. So only now we start to absorb this conciliar work, and finally even all materials were published just in this 21st century. So it's kind of forced 100 years pause, or about 100 years. So next council only happened in 1990, but don't get me wrong, there were councils, there were all Russian councils, but they could not really independently, freely discuss church matters. That's what I'm saying. So now councils, they are church events of the church, and nobody really interferes with them from the state side. So next council is supposed to take place either in 1922 or in 1923, And the only council that took place in 1923, indeed, was a renovationist council, right? The Russian church does not recognize any validity of this event, but this council claimed itself to be a sequel, a succeeding council to the All Russian Council of 1917, 1918. Right. So remember that there were three executive bodies uh, uh, appointed by All Russian Council. That All Russian Council became the supreme church authority in the Russian church, right? And it had three executive arms: His Holiness Patriarch of Russia, Sacred Synod, and the church council consisted of laymen, and presbyters and some bishops, right? So church was very, of course, very negative about losing all properties and losing of rights, right? That's what happened in 1918 when church was uh, right. All actually buildings were proclaimed in January 1918 as belonging to the people of Russia. So, and officially, a concept since that time until 1991 was that a community of congregation would use a church building because it's people's authority, it's people's rule, right? Everything belongs to the people. There is no private property on houses and land. So, and this sort of communal communal arrangement of the country gives you whatever you need. In this case, if you are a believer, you're supposed to have a church. But in reality, uh, if you look at the Soviet laws and if you look at the Soviet constitution, they might be quite progressive. But a problem was that there weren't any checks and balances. Since Bolsheviks take over in 1918, there was single party rule without checks and balances. So you cannot really expect in this situation that things would go very smoothly, right? And a lot of churches were closed down initially. Again, a good question to look at: why did people, on many occasions, they didn't stand up for churches? Why didn't they? Why didn't they uh, bother about a closure of their churches? Okay, so one possible explanation that I came up with, that many people, they treated church before the revolution as part of the imperial bureaucracy, and especially in rural areas. So, and that could be that could explain something. But there were, of course, many cases where people didn't want their church to be closed as well, right? So Patriarch Tikhon, he was elected before the Bolsheviks taking over, or maybe a few days difference, if I'm not mistaken. So, but he was installed already under the Bolsheviks' reign, right? And he had three phases which are seen through his writings on three phases in his relationship to the regime. The first one was unanimous with the council regarding rejection of the Bolshevik reign, but not on the grounds that Bolsheviks were imposers, but on the grounds, firstly, that they didn't do right things. So basically, the narrative was, we would bless your reign. I mean, if you ask, probably they would bless your reign uh, if you wouldn't have committed those atrocities. So it wasn't so much a question that the Bolsheviks they took over, how they took over, but a question was how they behaved towards the church and towards the people of Russia. Okay, so this attitude changed in 1919 in favor of a political, more a political uh, approach. And in 1922, Patriarch Tikhon was arrested in May, and since 1922 until his repose in 1925, it was what I call pro-Soviet course. Having said that, I use this term historically because often in our quarters it's like a swear word. So to say Soviet, one person wrote to me, "There is nothing good in the there was nothing good in the Soviet Union," right? So if you come from this perspective, then of course the Soviet it's almost like Nazis, but it's historical term. It's a historical term, and I try to do history, so that's why I use this here. But nevertheless, based again on reading of his epistles, of seeing that he expressed his condolences on the death of Lenin, that he mentioned, I'm not an enemy of the Soviet authority. Basically, his take was comparable with the ones of the early church apologists, right? Who did their best to say that we respect Roman laws, we contract marriages according to Roman laws, so we are citizens of the Rome, but we just cannot really, there is no way to compromise on office of emperor, of considering an emperor as a semi-god and so on. So, and that was similar situation at Patriarch Tikhon. He would go as far as he could regarding regarding recognizing the Soviet authority, saying that this is my government. I don't have any mental reservation in my attitudes toward my government. I'm not plotting against this government. And of course, in this attitude, he had to clearly dissociate himself from those members of the Russian church who had different experience because of the dividing front lines of the civil war. So again, very interesting time and productive time we are living is in, because we see how this uh, confrontation that was struck through the civil war ended. For most of us, there are people who didn't recognize reconciliation of 2007, but in fact, 2007 indeed finished civil war, at least in church, at least to the extent how the civil war at least that impact of the civil war onto the church, because uh, finally there was one wholesome restored. But those Russian people who who heroically resist to the Bolshevik oppression, right, found themselves abroad. And as in any object of research, no one should be idealized. And they were people of their own time. And after all, because of the things that happened before the revolution happened, and everybody was part of this. It not just didn't come overnight. That's something I personally beg to disagree. If it's somebody would say that it's just course of event, it's plotting, and just hairy day, and so on. No, that's also significantly problems of the previous system for me. for me. So you are entitled to disagree. So, but those people who stood up at this 11 hour, when it was already late, but they nevertheless, they heroically wanted to save their homeland from a dictatorship, from a authoritarian and later totalitarian reign. I think they did a heroic deed. So, but nevertheless, they were products of their time, and having reflected on this trauma, because to some extent it's comparable with what people of my generation lived when the Soviet Union collapsed. So, like people say, when did you visit your homeland? I would say I visited my homeland in 1991 because it was the Soviet Union, right? So where I was born and grew up. So and that reality collapsed, and of course, it was much more tragic when the Russian Empire collapsed because it sort of was comparably soft transition from the Soviet Union into modern Russia, but still very comparable. And they started to reflect on the causes of the Russian Revolution, and they decided to rewind things to the February Revolution, and actually blaming this plot against the Tsar, that like no leader of front of any of no army leader actually expressed his support to the Russian monarch, right? So in this sense, it somehow can be assessed as plotting. So Tsar found himself bitterly isolated. So when he was making the decision to abdicate, so really sort of he only God knows what he lived through back then. So uh, and they rewinded things back, and they found that the major problem was that the monarchy was toppled down. So there was very strong restorational feelings among many in the Russian diaspora. And since it's a very igniting issue, very dividing issue, there of course were very many of those who bitterly disagree with this. So and this divisive issue was brought into the church, unfortunately, in the summer of 1921. Metropolitans Yevlogy and Antony Hrapovitsky, they were invited to the Monarchist Congress in Reichengel in Germany, and the new Supreme Monarchist Council was pronounced. And one of my predecessors uh, in this capacity of the Russian Church history professor was Nikolai Dmitrovich Talberg, who was from Kiev. He probably was one of the proponents of the White Guard play Белая гвардия by Mikhail Afanasyevich Bulgakov, and he was very active from the very beginning in this organization. And members of the Supreme Monarchist Council also became very active in the first Pan-Diaspora Council in 1921 in Serbia, which came up with a resolution about the restoration of the House of Romanovs in Russia. But a problem with those things was that all those sort of, if I would say, it's a Russian expression, but sort of bills, счета за эти деяния. So Patriarch Tikhon was the one who had to pay a price for those activities, because since the Russian Church abroad was an integral part of the Russian Church, all meetings of its synod started with pro forma by the blessing of His Holiness Patriarch of Russia. Since Church is hierarchical in its mindset, everything is done through a blessing. So Bolsheviks said to Patriarch Tikhon, they there outside of Russia say what you could not say here inside of Russia. Basically, they are speak for you. They are speaking for you. So Patriarch Tikhon had to dissociate himself. I personally believe that living in the Soviet Union, he uh, he could not imagine that monarchy would be restored. Again, this is theoretical, right? This is theoretical. I don't have evidence for this. I don't have evidence for this, but I think it's sensible to, based on his other writings, unless you believe that all those writings he didn't really feel this way. I just think that any person who finds himself in particular circumstances, he goes through some experience, and he had very intensive experience for already uh, for already 4 years, sort of crash course under the Bolsheviks. And I just think that he realized that monarchy is not going to be restored. So he found those political acts of the first Russian Diaspora Council. So when you go home today, when Ivan Grisnov go home today, he might choose his uh, well-known route towards his place of employment, and to see on the right a picture of all those fathers, founding fathers of the Russian Church abroad, the members of the first Pan Diaspora Council, right? And again, they did their best. They did their best. They were people of the church, right? Their relatives were new martyrs in Russia, and under circumstances, it's understandable, but at the same time, as a historian, I should do my best to assess it. And again, I'm just a human, so somebody else would point out to my deficiencies, but you should do it the way you think about. So
Mhm.
that's I think a part, honestly. So anyway, uh, this council fully was not fully recognized, minus those decisions regarding Romanovs. And also another decision was appeal to the foreign nations to supply weapons to Russian political refugees. So kind of asking them to give to enarm them, to give them weapons that they would continue fight against the Bolsheviks. So this is another appeal from the council. And what do you expect from the Bolsheviks? That they would say, "Oh, we understand. Okay, so there is we can have different opinions on this. That's fine. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we understand that you don't like us." No, they consider this as a threat
Mhm.
to their existence, right? So, and church was kind of actively involved in this in the diaspora, right? So uh, that was part of this, right? Patriarch Tikhon remained through the whole civil war in Moscow, right? This decree about being a political was issued when, as I mentioned, Kornilov's shock regiment approached as close as 400 kilometers away from Moscow. They were just sort of a couple of strikes away from taking over the capital. Didn't materialize, they were overstretched and so on. But uh, Patriarch Tikhon, he didn't have a lot of, uh, he could not communicate with the parts of the Russian church divided by front lines. In 1920, there was bishop consecration in Tallinn, right? And he was invited to go there. The Bolsheviks didn't permit him to go abroad. So, and that's something that sends a message that the Russian church before the war uh, was not was suppressed, isolated, discriminated, and Patriarch Tikhon, he had to navigate this church. So in 1922, the Bolsheviks they used as a pretext, of course, this all Rush pan-diaspora council's political acts, as also they used an opportunity during the famine, because of the all years of the Civil War, agricultural productions fell down numbers. So people in the Volga River area and elsewhere in other areas, they experienced terrible famine. Patriarch Tikhon suggested, it was in 1921, to have a committee that would work hands in hands with the government, helping sort of collecting valuables from the church. On this stairway, I always look at those, and there are like confiscation of church treasures. It's like a treasure island, sort of. I mean, valuable seems to be a better word. So this word is where Metropolitan Benjamin portrait is on another stairway, not where Pan-Diaspora Council. So Patriarch Tikhon offered the state to work hand in hand with the church. Interestingly, the state declined because state wanted to humiliate the church. Again, it's fair to say it's not reading of somebody's mind and implying somebody, because it's based on now on archives, on discussions of the Soviet of the Bolshevik Politburo, not Politburo. I think it was still Politburo even back then. So, and since many people defended their churches, they grew up in their churches. Those churches meant to them. They were not real, how to say, lukewarm about those churches. So there were cases of clashes between police troops and defenders of the churches. People were were killed from both sides. Again, the way it was conducted, Bolsheviks should be tried for this, but not the church. But of course, with this one-party state, Patriarch Tikhon was accused in instigating those riots, and was put under the house arrest, while the Bolsheviks decided whether they should or not shoot him. Right?
And Father, I'm sorry.
Yes, yes.
So basically, the riots started coming up because the state was trying to humiliate the church by not allowing them to help with the famine and all that. Is that what I'm
Thank you. I appreciate this clarifying question, because coming from this idea that churches belong to the people's state, they wanted themselves to come to the church and see what they want to grab.
Okay.
Instead of church, as the church people proposed, we would appoint committees, and those committees would do this work for you, but that would be done in a respectful way. Because when people who doesn't recognize sanity, the sacredness of the place, right, come. So it doesn't matter holy vessels, if holy vessels contain body and blood of Christ, so what, right? So, and that what happened. It was a lot of is this the word desecration?
Yeah, desecration.
A lot of desecration. And that was very painful. That was very painful because in 1919, it was a year of desecration of relics. Both Bolsheviks wanted to demonstrate the church, it was a big commercial organization that was making money out of people's fears and whatever. So they forced special committees to come to church and open up relics. So, and that happened to Saint our Holy Fathers, Saint Sergius of Radonezh relics, a number of other relics. But also every cloud has a silver lining, because many uncorrupted relics were manifested, and very few cases of falsification. Yes, there were some cases where basically they found something they're not supposed to find, but mostly, as far as as I know, they found what was expected. In some cases, they even found some uncorrupted relics. So, right. So you see, this is an assault on a competing ideological institution, because sort of Bolsheviks, they were intolerantly zeal religious Marxists, right? I'm
Mhm.
saying, as I mentioned before, that Marxism became a religion on Russian soil, right? So Patriarch Tikhon was arrested. He was under the various forms of isolation until for 1 year. And uh, because of the very uh, aggressive interaction from the British government, and I worked in the archives of the Lambeth Palace in London, and there are documents about this, so it's not a hearsay. So the Brits, they submitted special special note to the Russian ambassador in Germany. I don't think they still have a diplomatic mission in Britain. And Patriarch Tikhon, probably for because of that, was spared, but he never was acquitted. He never was acquitted. He was still under investigation until the end of his days. So he was treated as a citizen beloved. So because the Bolsheviks, they would mention AKA Patriarch Tikhon, so they would treat him as a regular subject, as a regular citizen. And in this time when he was uh, arresting, on the day when he was arresting, or around that day in May of 1922, a very active group of clergymen associated previously with this union of democratic lay, democratic clergy and laity that was founded during the provisional government early days in 1917. So active clergy from St. Petersburg diocese, they decided that to and they had a blessing from the Bolsheviks to do this. They approached Patriarch Tikhon, asking him to transfer his office, in a sense, office, a chancellery, to them, because he was unable to be in charge of day in day out activities, since because of his situation. So Patriarch Tikhon conditionally agreed, and that was initial claim that the renovation is used to say that Patriarch Tikhon actually gave them permission to start acting, which wasn't fully accurate, and also Patriarch Tikhon didn't give them permission to set up a new church. So this is how renovationist movement started in 1922. And what was interesting, right, that Russian imperial bishops who were consecrated before the revolution, most of them who joined them initially, they were old-time bishops. They started to join this new ecclesiastical authority, new ecclesiastical organization, including future Patriarch of Russia, Metropolitan Sergei Strogorodsky, who later on repented and was received back into the Patriarchal Church, because the church, the Tikhonite Church, the Russian Church, perceived clearly this movement as schismatic, and still that's canonical assessment of this movement as a schismatic. So doesn't mean that those people has to be demonized. Doesn't mean that they have to be all treated as just how to say people with lack of moral principles. There were people who some minority who honestly believe in this cause, who wanted sort of to take care of the various problems of the church, and there were people who were just didn't understand what's going on, because remember that the Russian church for 1,000 years almost was under the protection of the state. And now sort of Russian church started to catch up with the Roman church in the sense of persecution, on the scale of persecution, on the scale of oppression that the pre-Constantinian church experienced. So it's very, how to say, it's wasn't easy in 1922 when those priests, they came up with this appeal that they have permission to found ecclesiastical authority, right? Some people took it face value. Some bishops took it face value. So even, and then those bishops who were very prominent, like Metropolitan Sergei Strogorodski, who was one of the brilliant is of the brilliant hierarchs, a theologian, an ascetic type, and very wise man. When you read his canonical treatises, canonical exegesis, they are very beautifully done. But when people like him joined renovationists, other people would say, well, if this person, he is a canon law scholar, he joins them, so that's suits me, that's fine. Then I will do the same. So it was a huge time of confusion, and it was providential that the Russian church, if I dare to say this, that the Russian church had a figurehead in the person of Patriarch Tikhon, because if the Russian church would have been a synodal church with just a primate, a metropolitan, so I don't think that would really work that well, right? So that gives you idea. I would like to mention one more thing, that those Russian people, Russian churchmen who found themselves in the territories of the whites, right? The white Russia in the year 1918 took the territory of Siberia, of Russian Far East, Ukraine, some central regions like Kursk, Oryol, Voronezh, and Volga rivers, and then the south of Russia and Cossacks area of Kuban and Don. So because of the All-Russian Council 1917-1918, people who found themselves there, I mean church people, they already had this point of reference, conciliar point of reference. At the very beginning, right, at the very beginning of 1918, or at the end, I'm sorry, my bad, at the end of 1918, members of the All-Russian Council who found themselves in Siberia, they set up Supreme Church Administration in Tomsk. So there was a Tomsk Council, and believe it or not, only this year, gentlemen, only this year, the acts of this council was published finally.
Oh, wow, really?
By a priest from Omsk, Father Dmitry Olikhov.
Wow, incredible.
It is. So there is a saying, I don't know if two Ivan's familiar with this, that в России нужно жить долго.
Yes.
Okay, now, so can you turn it into English, please, for me?
You need to live for a while in Russia.
No. No, I'm sorry, I beg to disagree. So you need to try again.
I'm just I was just joking. It the way I understand it, at least, it means that you need to, experience a lot to understand the subject at hand.
I see. Maybe I misunderstood this, but I just thought that you need to live long because things change in Russia. So
Oh, yes, yeah.
So that's what I meant. Yeah.
okay.
By experiences.
By experience, yeah, but also you see, you not necessarily what you see today would last until tomorrow. Brother Ivan Griznov, yeah.
Yeah, I understood it like in order to see some historical changes, you have to live long in Russia because like processes go in the long term.
Exactly.
Mm.
Yeah, that's it. So that's what happens now. And they assembled in Tomsk. And interestingly, Russian ecclesiastical mission in Peking, in Beijing, which was very, very well established, also an academic forepost, because they studied sinology. They were founded in the 17th century. So normally they just joined in communications, in subordinations with the supreme ecclesiastical authority in Siberia. So then, based on this experience of the church authority in Siberia, in May of 1919 in Stavropol in Caucasus, there was another council, Southern Council of Russia, and also acts of this council were published by Yulia Alexandrovna Biryukova from Rostov-on-Don in just 2 years ago, right? So, and those two events, they inspired in their turn Patriarch Tikhon in November of 1920 to come up with his decree permitting permitting temporary ecclesiastical autonomies. That basically, if you found them yourself, your diocese isolated, so your bishop could fully could act fully independently until normal course of the events would be restored. So some of the people who didn't recognize our reconciliation with Moscow Patriarchate, they continue referring to this document, they continue referring this, whereas the Russian Church at the end of the day decided that the Moscow Patriarchate, as it is the Church of Russia. There is no other Russian Church, and I would add from myself, there is no other Russia. We only have one Russia, and we only have one church. So we want maybe to be better. We want maybe changes here and there, but that's what it is. So if that's there is no other Russia, and there is no other Russian church. So, and therefore we work within this frame. So this decree from 1920 was issued when the evacuation from Crimea already ended, which was peculiar timing. I keep asking, how come that the civil war ended and Patriarch Tikhon suddenly, very late, came up with this decision, right? So it's interesting timing. Once again, possible, sort of my interpretation, that also he wanted to give some grounds for those Russian refugees, and also give some kind of guiding document for extraordinary circumstances, because all canon law is designed for normal time of things. When extraordinary situations, extraordinary circumstances, people wish they would be guided by the spirit, but not by the letter, because letter doesn't really often offer any solutions. So, right, I know that we started late, but still, I guess we should finish on time. I'm any questions, anything that you any clarifications? So
Everything is pretty straightforward.
okay, good.
Что нужно читать к следующему уроку, Андрей?
Да.